NAMSI attendees, please join me in welcoming Northwest Tap Connection.
feels when we cry. Yeah. Our connection's so magnetic on the floor. Nothing can stop us tonight. When I'm walking with you, I watch the whole room change. Baby, that's what you do. No, baby, don't play. Blame it on my confidence. Or blame it on your measurements. Shut it down on sight. That's right. We out here tripping in finesse. It don't make no sense. Out here tripping in finesse. You know it, you know. We out here tripping in finesse. It don't make no sense. Out here tripping in finesse. You know it, you know it. Fellas, grab your ladies if your lady fine. Tell her she don't want for life. Ladies, grab your fellas and let's do this right. If you own one like me and mine. Tripping in finesse. It don't make no sense. Out here tripping in finesse. You know it, you know. Tripping in finesse with my baby. Oh, tripping in finesse. You know it, you know we got it going on.
Wow, what a way to start the second day of the NAMP conference. Northwest Tap Connection. Woo! I will not be dancing for you, that is for sure. So I hope you all had a fun time at the Seattle Art Museum. I want to thank again Randy and his team at the Seattle Office of Arts and Culture for putting together a great program for us last night. Performers, the space, it was really incredible. I hope you went out afterwards and had a great time as well. All right. Here are some fun facts about Seattle that I found on the internet, so I know that they are true. All right, Seattle was the first major American city to have a female mayor. Bertha Knight Landis held the office from 1925 to 1928 and was notable for taking a hard line against corruption. In fact, she had fired their chief of police. Now, last November, Seattleites voted in their first female mayor in almost a century with Jenny Durkham. So good, Jenny. All right. The iconic Pike Place Market started because of overpriced onions. So between 1906 and 07, the price of produce and onions particularly skyrocketed, and consumers, as well as civic leaders, believed price gouging wholesalers were to blame. So the city proposed a public market where customers can buy directly from farmers. And in August in 1907, Pike Place Market opened for business, and today it's the oldest continuously operating farmers market in America. So I hope you get a chance to go down there. It's a pretty cool place. Seattleites are a cultured bunch. About 80% of adults hold Seattle Public Library cards, and the Seattle-based Pacific Northwest Ballet is said to have the highest per capita attendance of any ballet in America. So I hope you're having a great time here. It's really such a great city to be together for NAMP. Now, before I move on to the program this morning, I want to take some time to give some love to the amazing Americans for the Arts team that I am so lucky to work with every single day. I particularly want to thank Ruby Lopez Harper for putting the program together. I want to thank Moshe Day Edwards, who's leading the meetings team and logistics, and you've seen her running around doing an amazing job. Teresa Coleman, who's heading up registration, and I think you've all had a chance to interact with her and the team there. And then Nicole Goodman on marketing has led you all to this conference. So I thank her and the great team, our marketing and communications team there. So for the entire Americans for the Arts team, if we can give them all a round of applause. Thank you. And I also want to point out a blog salon that we have going on right now that Anne-Marie Watts has been putting together called Nonprofit Arts Women Rock. So it's a series of blogs by women who run nonprofit arts organizations throughout the country, hashtag Nonprofit Arts Women Rock, and you can get it on the blog.americansforthearts.org. So I hope you get a chance to hear or go on and read and hear from these amazing women who are leading arts organizations around the country. All right, now it is my pleasure to introduce this morning's keynote. So Ijeoma Oluo is an American writer who authored So You Want to Talk About Race. I hope you've had a chance to pick up her book. She's going to be doing a book signing after this session today. I think there are just a few left. She also did the Badass Feminist Coloring book, so I hope you had a chance to see that. She's written for several newspapers as well as online news platforms. Now, she began her career in technology and digital marketing. She began writing as a way to connect to her community and the people that she cares about in order to hear the frustration she was having in America. She's born in Denton, Texas. She's based in Seattle now. She was named one of the 50 most influential women in Seattle in 2018. Her writing covers intersectionality, online harassment, the Black Lives Matter movement, race, economics, parenting, feminism, and social justice. Many of her articles have gone viral specifically because of the importance of her critiques of race and the invisibility of Black women's voices in the United States today. So please help me welcome her to the stage this morning, Ijeoma Oluo.
Oh, I love that like Oprah music intro. That was nice. Like I'm supposed to, and now I feel like I need to rewrite the speech to be a little more uplifting. It's such a pleasure to be here. I am very excited. I was really excited when I was asked to do this. This is not usually the type of venue that I am invited to speak at. I was like, arts marketing? Oh wow, I can do that. And as was stated in my intro, I actually worked in marketing for years before I started working in the arts. And I'm still at times really shocked that all day, every day, I am either writing or avoiding writing, one of the two. I mean, to be honest, most writers, we spend far more time avoiding writing than actually writing. But I never imagined, and I say this with all honesty, I never imagined that I would be able to do this full time. And so I'm going to do what I don't know if I do it best, but I do it most often, which is talk about myself for a while and kind of talk about how I got here, because I'm hoping that within it there will be something that y'all can use in what you do day in and day out. So I was always naturally talented when it came to the arts. I drew, I wrote, I even had teachers that invested a lot in me. I remember I had a teacher in middle school who actually, you had her planning period. Teachers have like that one period where they can plan their day, and she instead turned that into an independent study period and just had me and one other kid come in every day for an hour, and she just bought us a bunch of art supplies and kind of let us run wild. And English classes were always the classes that I knew I could put the least amount of effort in and still get a really good grade. And I took full advantage of that all the way through college. I remember an English professor telling me, like, Ijeoma, you would get a 4.0 if you would just turn in a single page of footnotes for one of these essays. And I'm like, yes, but I can get a 3.0 and never do that. So I think I figured this system out. It works well for me, because guess what I don't like doing? Footnotes. But I always knew, even when I was younger, people would ask me what I wanted to do, even as I spent all my time drawing and all of my time writing stories, and I would say, oh, maybe I'll be a lawyer. Maybe I will run a business. And the reason why I always said that was, first off, I was incredibly poor. I grew up very, very poor. I grew up on welfare, grew up on Section 8 housing. At times we were homeless. We didn't have electricity for weeks at a time. We didn't have a phone for years at a time. We would eat dinner at soup kitchens. The arts was definitely something that I saw as a luxury for other people. Right? You would hear these stories of these great artists, and they were usually people that came from these wealthy families or had these patrons that would just come and bestow upon them money to sit and focus on their arts. Or they were people who were really comfortable living in a basement well into their 40s. And I say this because my brother's one of those people who was really comfortable with it. And I don't want to sell him short because I don't think he was comfortable. No one's comfortable. But he knew that it's what he needed to do in order to do the arts. But especially as a person of color, I knew as a black woman that my first and foremost responsibility was to try to survive, and that there was no space in my future for passion, for creativity, outside of what I could turn into a hobby in my off hours. And I really did follow that path. I wouldn't say political science is the most practical degree, but I got a degree in political science, and I used it well to argue on the internet while also working in tech, which is what I think a lot of people in Seattle do, right? You get your degree in something and you go work in tech, and then you just use that degree when you're losing an argument about that particular topic. You're like, well, do you have a degree in political science? I have a degree in, anyways. I'm just saying. And I worked in tech. I raised my kids as young single parents, and I was working my way up in the world. My entire focus was kind of financial security that had eluded my family for multiple generations, and to know that I could provide for my kids and that they wouldn't grow up without electricity and eating in soup kitchens. And eventually that brought me to marketing, and it brought me by way of tech, working through tech, and then moving into digital marketing. And I did use some of my artistic talents, and I used mostly my tech skills and a lot of my talking skills, and I didn't, I knew that I was well suited to be able to educate people on anything, be it marketing or whatnot. And I would love to say it was a very creative job, but it wasn't. I wasn't in arts marketing. I was in automotive marketing. And I'll let you know something. If you are a politically progressive queer black woman, truck marketing. Now, I'm not saying that black queer women don't own trucks, because that's not true. But for some reason, we're still not defined as a target market. And it wasn't an environment where I was, I would say comfortable being like open, whole self, and definitely not as fully creative as I could be. But one thing I did see throughout that I was always frustrated with was how often disconnected, not only from my market, but from other markets, that marketing could be. Like how often there was this weird translation that would come from like these ad teams that were like, this is our vision. And I'm like, is that vision from the past? And then I would try to translate it. And it was an interesting world working for dealers, because I worked for a national brand, but I had to implement that work with local dealerships. And so I was that translator between this is what the brand wants and this is what you want, and this is where we find out how to get people to buy more cars. And I worked through the crash of the auto industry, which is a really depressing time to try to do this work, but I was very good at it. And I had my frustrations, especially as someone who never likes being told what to do, who doesn't like rules that don't seem to make sense. And top-down marketing can become incredibly frustrating. Trying to explain why this kind of national strategy is never going to work for this particular market, how it's cutting out entire swaths of the population, or even just not meeting the needs of the people who are doing the work locally. And I did all of this in what was an incredibly sexist and often racist environment. If you were to watch, you all have seen Mad Men, right? I'm assuming, right? Like, I feel like you would be a crowd for Mad Men. I mean, Maybe you've seen it or heard of it. So if you were to take Mad Men, and you were to take every semblance of what we would call class out of Mad Men, you would have the auto industry. And it was my job to make this to work in this industry. I remember, one time sitting in a marketing meeting talking about the difficulty in promoting this new vehicle, and one of the regional managers said, "That vehicle is about as useless as a single 40-year-old woman." And I looked around and I was like, wait, what year are we in? What year is this? Did I time travel to a different place? But that was honestly the environment I was in and I was working in. I was still working in marketing when I started writing. And part of the reason why I started writing is, believe it or not, I couldn't share my political opinions in this wildly progressive space that I was working in. And as was stated earlier, I needed to find a way to connect to my community. I needed to find a way to wholly exist someplace. I needed to be heard. There were vital things happening in this country that were impacting me and my community and my family. And I felt like, the space where I'm spending so much of my time, no one would see me. And that's honestly why I started writing. And I was very surprised by how quickly my career took off. I am 38. Am I 38? What year is it? I think I'm 38. Am I 38? I'm probably 38. I think maybe I'm gonna be 38. This next month. We'll find out. If you follow me on social media, I'll update you once I look at a calendar. Yeah, I think I'm gonna be 38. And at 30, I never saw writing in my future. I turned 30 working in marketing happily with no idea that this was in store for me. And so to be where I am now, at whatever age I actually am, writing full-time, with a book out and another book coming, I had no idea this was in store for me. And I often look back because other people are really shocked too. People will be like, wait, I thought you were always around. I thought you were always doing this. No, I really wasn't. I was trying to sell trucks. And looking back and trying to figure out, what happened and how I got to this space, because it was not deliberate at first. I realized how much actually working in marketing, selling cars and trucks, actually had helped me get to where I am. The skills I learned in marketing combined with my sometimes annoyingly unflagging social justice values, sometimes it's being generous, always annoying social justice values that I never give up, kind of actually turned into like this perfect combination to build the not only success but the freedom that I need to do the work that I do. And so I'm going to talk a little bit about some of the things I didn't realize had kind of seeped into my brain from this work as I started writing. Because like I said, when I started writing, I really had no intention of building a career. But I was kind of in this space, and it just kind of happened around me. And turned around, and one day I had a career. I learned the value of brand. And I had learned this actually before I started working in marketing. As a Black woman, people will try to define you. People do define you. The whole world defines you in a way that I think a lot of people don't fully understand. But I walk into every room predefined. And I knew from an early age, I learned in probably elementary school, that if I wanted to have success, I was going to have to actually come out fighting preconceived notions. I was going to have to come out consistently defining who I was as strongly as possible. I learned this quite early, that if there was any hint of something that wasn't who I actually was, that was going to be the thing that would stick if it was convenient to anyone else. And so I guarded my reputation constantly. I was so vigilant. I remember even the hint, someone saying something that maybe wouldn't reflect upon me the way that I wanted to, and I would be right up there like, excuse me, what is this I'm hearing? What am I hearing? What's going on? No, 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 no. Because I knew that there was no grace afforded me. I would never be seen as just a person who could be complicated, who could be multiple things at once. I was a Black woman, and I was going to have to be determined as to what that meant in white male spaces. I learned about brand consistency. And part of this was honestly something I used to have to always explain to clients all the time was people need to know what you stand for. And believe it or not, we actually really do need to know what automotive manufacturers stand for and what car dealers stand for, because you're driving your family around. This is definitely a trust issue, right? You are making a huge financial purchase, and then you are trusting the lives of the people you love most to that purchase. And saying, trying that every new fad doesn't work. It doesn't engender trust. Even with younger markets, and a lot of times they'd be like, we want a younger market, we're gonna try this cool thing. Like, nope, nope. Even 17-year-olds want to get somewhere safely. Even though I look at my 17-year-old and I wonder if that's actually true. It is true. But I also, having worked through these industries through a lot of scandal, I worked through the crash, I worked through all these weird scandals of manufacturing issues and things like this, I also learned how incredibly difficult it is to come back from lost trust. And as I was working as a writer, I recognized that trust is a huge part of that work as well, that you're trusting people and they are trusting you. And they're trusting you with their emotions and their thoughts and how they interpret the world. And I feel like a lot of people discount how much trust is actually built into the arts. But it is such not only are you asking for time from a lot of audiences or money, but you're asking them to invest emotionally. The arts really don't exist without an emotional response. And to get people to stop from their busy days and be vulnerable and connect, you really do have to have trust. And there is an extreme sense of violation felt when that trust has been violated. People turn away not only from that artist, but oftentimes from the art itself. And as a writer working in the age of fake news, I've been very aware of how the impact that this erosion of trust has had on the industry and how people come to writing and come to words. And we've seen this violation of trust not only in writers who are dishonest in how they write, but also writers who are dishonest in how they market themselves. We have seen the violations, especially with Me Too, in many of these male writers who have put themselves up as these woke, understanding men who are asking you, come with me through my flaws and find out how I learned, and you find out they've learned nothing, and they've been using their premise to prey upon other writers. And you suddenly look back at the time and care and love that you've invested into that art, and you feel used, and you feel like it's dirty, and you feel like you don't trust the emotions you had when you were working through it. You don't trust that experience anymore, and it makes you want to back away from that art. I learned about the power of social media. Now, this was something I learned actually later than a lot of people think, because social media is a huge part of my career. I would not exist without social media. But the main reason why I was on social media all the time was because it was my job. Because I was marketing, and so I was literally always logged in. And it was the only place where I could really talk about what was happening, because I couldn't talk about it in the office. And so I'd be in the office, and I would be really frustrated, and I'd go, and I would tweet. And it was an odd thing, because I think it was the spur of the moment. It was very authentic, because it was literally me trying to find an outlet for my emotions. And so, I would do a string of tweets just trying to get my feelings out there. And then I would get this call from NBC News and be like, would you like to comment on these tweets? And I'm like, I will call you from my lunch break. And I would hang up. I did actually I remember doing one of my first major interviews with New York Magazine, and I did it hiding in the car behind a dealership lot, trying to sound professional as cars and people are yelling past me, but I knew it wasn't something I could do at a desk. I couldn't talk about out in the open. But I was always telling my clients about regularly connecting with their audience, regular social media updates. And because I was always on there checking on them, I was always updating, and I didn't quite realize how integral that would actually be for my work. I didn't realize that I would look at my numbers and be like, why is it growing? I remember for the longest time that I only got on Twitter because my brother told me that it was a really great place to laugh at celebrities. And he was like, no, it's great, Ijeoma. He was like, for some reason, celebrities don't understand that Twitter is public. Like, if you go, and this was at the time when, so I know Alec Baldwin just punched a dude, but remember that time when he was always saying something on Twitter that was ridiculous, and you were like, do you not know you're in public? And then we realized he literally never gets that he's in public. But there was a time on Twitter where he was always saying something awful. Like, he would say something ridiculous that didn't make any sense or just plain old rude. And my brother was like, 30 Rock was still going on. He was like, no, it's amazing. No one has told Alec Baldwin that Twitter is public. And you have to get on this platform because there's so many other celebrities like this. And so that's why I got on there. And my first tweet is literally like me tweeting at my brother, like, is this how this works, or something like that. But I was always on there, and I was working, and I didn't realize that I was growing an audience. And I would log in one day, and I'd have 5 followers, then I'd have 300 followers, then I'd have 5,000 followers, and then suddenly I had 50,000 followers, and now I think it's like 150,000 followers. And I realized it was due to the consistency of being out there all the time and always connecting and always talking. And I was doing that because I needed a connection. And then as I continued to work, I realized the value of it, and I test ideas out on social media. If I have an essay, if you see me let me just throw this out there. What I'm really doing is I'm testing an idea for an essay. It's great testing for a market to find out if I get a lot of retweets, if I get a lot of comments. If it falls flat, I have a feeling, I'm like, oh, okay, this is probably not a topic that's ripe for an essay. But if I get a lot of people going, oh, that's intriguing, I want to hear more about that, then I kind of try to follow it up. And I also have found, by the way, if any of you are interested, if you can make a very complicated topic interesting in a tweet, you can make a really good essay out of it. If you can boil it down to, it's a little easier now that we've doubled the characters, but if you can boil it down to, back then, what was it, 140 characters? If you could boil it down to 140 characters and get hundreds of people to be like, ooh, what? Oh man, imagine, all the characters you're given in a whole essay, you can do magic. But it helped me be concise. It helped me figure out my messaging. To try to get something really complicated to carry over small bits of words, it helped me figure out what I actually wanted to say. I became a better writer because of social media. When you're trying to get people to hang with you, not only through one tweet, but then through the tweet you attach it, to the other tweet you attach it, and you don't know where in that string of tweets they're coming across, it really helps you cut all the fat out of your work. It made it much easier for me to know exactly what I was trying to say, even in these longer essays, because if I couldn't get people to click on it, and clickbait doesn't necessarily work in Twitter the way it works for headlines, I was going to be lost, and it made me a better writer. I learned the value of a name, and this is probably the most important thing that I learned. In my work, I was caught regularly in marketing between the brand and the individual dealers. And the dealers were individuals, they were families who had been in our communities for multiple generations. And really, have you all seen Friday Night Lights? I'm just gonna drop all these old television shows. Great show, isn't it? Oh my God, it's such a good show. The local dealer that was like a total asshole, but like involved in everything? Those are real people. And I don't know how many affairs they're having, but they're having a lot. And they are really heavily involved in everything, and not so much, Seattle dealers, it's still Seattle, okay, so they're a little less. But like anywhere else you go, it really is, they're it's pride, it's reputation, it's family, and you really think you are the center of a town, and in some ways you are. And they really did think that the business was about them, and the dealership had their name on it, and it was about what they were donating to local schools, and their Toys for Tots every Christmas, and it was all about their commercials, their weird, hokey commercials. Whatever their claim to fame was. I worked with a dealer, their claim to fame was the largest flag in the tri-state area. I get, okay, I mean, no one there made that flag. They just bought it. You can just buy a big flag, but I'm just saying, that's a very, I wonder if they just keep buying bigger ones. If there's a dealership later, it's like, oh, you think so? Ha ha ha, I just spent $50 more and now I have the biggest flag. But I would work with these dealers and they would talk about what they stood for and who they were, but through all of their efforts and everything they thought they were in their community, the honest to God truth was my job was to make sure that the brand always came out on top. And to make sure that whatever marketing idea they had fell in line. And to make sure at the end of the day that the customers left thinking brand, not name. And that they wouldn't care that they bought their car from this place. And yeah, I wanted them to have a good experience. But I also wanted to know that if they moved to another city, they were going to look for the brand. And I wanted to know that the brand was going to be around. And this meant that I had a lot of veto power, and I did a lot of undermining that I had to do. And they thought they were the creators, and in many ways they were, and they were the lifeblood of the industry. But they had far less power than they thought they did. And when the whole market crashed, and I had to oversee marketing for dealerships that were closing left and right and ending 3-4 generations of business, it became very clear how little power there was. But I also saw the few that had power, the few that could do whatever they wanted, the few who could flaunt all of the national marketing strategies. They could do whatever. I had a dealer who had a website for a fancy car, luxury car model, and he had a basset hound that would walk out onto the website and sniff the logo and turn around. Now that is not consistent with luxury car marketing, in case you're wondering. And I would tell everyone, can't do this, can't do this, can't do that. And then I would get to this dealer and be like, you know what, you can do whatever you want. Because they had built a name that was so strong that the brand actually didn't mean anything in that area. And if they were to lose that dealer, if that dealer were to go to another brand, they would completely lose market share in that area. And I remembered that power, and I remembered how easily you could think as an individual creator you had power, but you really didn't. And how important it was actually to be known for your name from the beginning. And as a writer, I knew that I had a couple of things working against me. One, my name is hard for a lot of people to say and remember, but I knew I was going to have to get people to, because I saw almost immediately how often artists' work is co-opted and is seen to be a perfect fit for a brand as long as it is. And it's used to kind of fulfill this, and you can get your work in shows. And my brother's a musician. I grew up around artists, and I watched them say, well, this kind of fits our brand if you tweak this, and it'll be great for you. But at the end of the day, people actually leave with no idea who that artist is. And it doesn't actually lead to more work. Or if it does lead to more work, it leads to work that's exactly like the work before. And I have had people actually reach out to me and say, I liked this article you wrote here. Can you write the exact same article for me and just change a word or two because we want this readership? And I knew that I was going to have to leave every piece I wrote. People were going to have to leave knowing that I wrote the piece. And this meant that every piece had to sound like I wrote the piece. It meant that I was not going to I was not going to allow my work to be changed to fit every platform that I was given. Now, I mean, there are some things, right? I don't write for The Guardian the way that I would write for the establishment, primarily because it's British and people don't quite get like what a lot of these words are, and you get a lot of weird comments that are like, huh, what? Why? How did this woman get into The Guardian? But they'll do that regardless. The Guardian is hilarious because it's the most British version of Get Off My Lawn in the comments that I've ever seen. They're like, what? What is this shenanigans? And you're like, oh, you're adorable. But I knew that if I didn't get my name out there, I saw so many other writers who would talk to me, and we'd be in writing groups, and they would talk about how they had worked on this, and then by the time I got through editing, it was completely unrecognizable. All the teeth was taken out, all the blackness was taken out, all the feminism was taken out, it was softened, it was put through this translation. And I knew that I had to avoid that, and I would have to start avoiding it. I saw how hard it is to change your brand, to change your name, to get known for something else when you're already established. And so I knew from the beginning this is what I was going to have to do. And so I worked very hard to make sure that I was the one sharing my work. I worked very hard to make sure that my work was always something that I knew I could look back on 5 years later and be proud of. And it also meant that, I turned down a lot of work. It meant that I moved from place to place. It meant that I didn't actually sign with, I didn't sign exclusively with any publishers. I knew that I wanted to build a name on my values. I knew that I wanted something I could live with forever. And so I wanted my writing to be known to be true to me, and I wanted my trustworthiness and my independence to be the value add. And if you build your independence as your value add as an artist, it means that you're actually less valuable to a platform if they feel like they have exclusive rights to you than if they know that that they can borrow you for a minute and then you leave again. And there are plenty of people who don't agree with what I say. If you just read my emails or my mentions or my DMs, you'll find plenty of people who don't agree with what I say. But very rarely do people say that they think I'm lying or that I'm manipulating anything. I hear from people all the time who say they disagree with everything. I don't know why they keep reading it. I have better things to do with my time when I disagree with everything. But they say, but I trust you. I know that you're at least telling your truth, even if I think it's completely wrong and you're maybe the worst thing that ever happened to writing. I also know that you have integrity. And so far, this has worked. So far, I am doing the work that I love, work that matters, work that is necessary, work that is sometimes incredibly difficult, and I am able to pay my bills. And I don't believe that artists should starve. And at every step of the way as my profile rises, I'm actually pulled closer and closer to who I am and what I believe, because that actually is my brand. My brand is my integrity. My brand is my honesty, which means that, I feel the burden of that with every bit more platform I get of, I better watch every word I tweet. And it's not because I want people are going to get mad at me, but simply because I know that everything I have is built on my honesty. And that means I have to actually live that in every way in which I'm seen. And I am grateful. I have watched many people in the arts, especially creators of color, leave. I've watched them never even get started. There are better writers than me that you will never hear of. It has taken a lot of work to get where I have been, a lot of faith, and a lot of luck. But there are also a lot of hurdles I've kind of had to jump over in order to get to where I am. And one of them is I've had to use a lot of time. A lot of time. The amount of time to build a platform outside of traditional channels, because when I started writing, traditional channels weren't open to me. I was not a writer anyone was looking for. People were not accepting my pitches. I was a black woman writing about race who did not write in ways that necessarily immediately appealed to white editors, white publishers. I didn't have sound bites. I wasn't this skinny model who could get on MSNBC and like sort of cry a little bit and then, they'd say, oh, write an article now. I was a single parent who was very angry and upset and wanted to talk directly to my audience, to my community. And I didn't want to have to translate everything I said. And this meant that in order to find my audience, I had to put that work in. I had to put so many hours into building a social media platform, building that audience. I worked the opposite. I built the audience, and then the platforms came. I got to the point where people were saying, oh, if 50,000 people are reading what this person says on her blog, I want some of that. How do I get that? And then they would reach out to me. But no one was willing to very few people were willing to take a chance on me. I had to prove, I had to go and find, I had to define my audience. And I had to give oftentimes publishers an idea of what their audience could be, because they did not think that there were people out there who would read these things. And I had to show they would. I still have to maintain that all the time. I took a social media break a little over a year ago. I don't know if any of you guys remember that weird debacle I had with Cracker Barrel. Debacle? I don't know if debacle is the word for the weirdness that happened there. It's a long story. Google Cracker Barrel Gate if you want to know, and it will ruin your week because it's just so weird and it just makes humans seem awful. But there was this thing where I went into Cracker Barrel. It became a thing. I took a week off social media after it was over. I just needed to decompress. And I could not get anyone to read anything I published in that time. I felt really bad for the people who had things published during that window because they got no views. If I wasn't there pushing and working that network that I had built, if I wasn't there all the time, my work wasn't getting out there. And I have other friends in the arts who have the luxury of being able to be completely out of these spaces, but that's because they have a traditional marketing industry that's designed for them, that works for them, that continues to put their work out there. And mine simply doesn't, because not only am I a writer that many of these places aren't looked for, but I'm writing to an audience that many marketers, that many corporations, many publishers aren't looking for. And so I consistently have to do this myself. I lost a lot of opportunities. I have had to turn down much work that would have negative repercussions for my career long term or would have violated my principles. I've had to pull commissioned pieces that came back from editing that were completely divorced from my voice. I've had to call and demand changes for how titles were done via clickbait to get people to read them that were just completely wrong to me as far as what I needed out there. I knew I didn't have the luxury as a writer, as a Black woman, to get it wrong. We don't get many second chances. I've had to turn down paid work. I've had to sever relationships with with editors and with publishers who maybe valued the readership I brought, but didn't actually value my community and the community that nurtured me and brought me to where I am. I've had to expend a lot of mental and emotional energy trying to promote my work and work with other people whose job it is to promote my work in a way that is healthy and effective for the work I do. My book came out in January, and I will start off by saying that my experience was actually so much better than many other writers of color, and particularly Black women writers, have had with their books. But every single person I worked with in the process of writing my book was white. Every single person. My editors, my copy editors, my publicists. There was not a single person of color I worked with. And this meant that I had to translate everything. I had to translate what every bit of slang in my book was. I had to have back and forth arguments over what terminologies we were using. Even discussions about what the cover design would look like. I would have to explain why maybe this imagery was not the imagery that I would want attached to a book on race. having to have these debates back and forth and then having to explain, no, maybe something dark and ominous isn't good for a book about talking about race. Maybe I don't want people approaching it with trepidation. Maybe I want it to be a little more straightforward, And then just even who I marketed my book to. I spent many months when my book came out explaining that no, it was not just a book for white people. And if you were to read the early reviews, it would literally say, this is the book for white people to learn about race, even though I explicitly said in the book multiple times. But I did not write this for white people. Doesn't mean that there weren't times I was writing to white people. Doesn't mean that there weren't specific sections in the book to white people, but I write everything for people of color, and particularly black women. They were specifically addressed in the book. It was very clear, but the amount of times people would say, this book is for white people. And then a person of color would stumble upon it and go, oh, I had no idea there was and they would send out tweets going, hey, if you thought this was just a book for white people, it's not. I'm like, thank you. But you wouldn't have known that even from the interviews I did. All of the interviews that I was scheduled for the first 2 weeks my book came out were with white interviewees. I will always remember spending Martin Luther King Day in an empty NPR studio for 5 hours talking to white radio hosts on white Q&A shows, answering questions about race. This is not how I wanted to spend Martin Luther King Day. I don't even think it's how Martin Luther King would have wanted to spend Martin Luther King Day. But also, it was not how I necessarily wanted my work to be known. It's not what I wanted my book to be seen as, just this service for white America to go and consume. It's not why I wrote it. I wrote it to make the lives of people of color easier. And it certainly wasn't making my life easier. But this was the avenue that the traditional publishing industry thought would sell. There were times where I was asked to do events for the books, and I was always partnered with white people. I remember the first time I got to actually do an event with another person of color was me just stopping and going, hey. I know that you have this white interviewee lined up, but there's also this person of color here, and maybe there will be a lot more for this audience if I'm not answering the same 5 questions on race that I've answered for every interview about this book for the last 4 months. Maybe seeing 2 people of color talking about their experiences of race in this book is something that everyone would learn from. And there was always this look of kind of blankness at first, what do you mean? But how can a white audience relate to a book if there's not a white person on this stage? Y'all, I watched Friends. And there were some things that were foreign to me, but I got through. I understood the whole Rachel Ross thing. I got it enough to follow along. People can stretch. And you can see 2 people of color up on stage talking about art, talking about writing, talking about life. And even if that's not the experience you've had, you can actually come and learn something, and you can sit through it, and you don't necessarily have to see your reflection in every bit of art that's made to you. And it is so interesting to me how even in the arts, which is supposed to be a place that's free from so many constructs, the idea that everything had to be filtered through a white lens, and often a white male lens, before it could be palatable is shocking to me. And it's not only an insult to the artist, but it's an insult to audiences and their capability to stretch and adjust and figure out what's happening and grow. So, even with all of these issues, I would say that I'm still incredibly privileged. There are a lot of things from a marketing standpoint that work for me. I'm pretty. I am. I'm tall. I'm light-skinned. I'm able-bodied. I'm college-educated. I talk like I grew up in Seattle. These things all work for me in a market where many other Black women who do not have these things are not able to get a platform, are not able to be published. Not many Black women start their writing while working in digital marketing and are able to build a platform, build an audience, understand how to put a site together, and do all the things they need to do to get their work out there when traditional avenues aren't there for them. But the truth is that these skills shouldn't be necessary. And this level of privilege shouldn't be necessary in order to see a Black woman up on stage talking about her experience in the arts. There is so much that we are missing. There is so much amazing art that we're not seeing that is dying because it is not supported, because it is not deemed marketable. If you're an artist, you find often that the business of art works to exploit. But if you're an artist of color, you will be lucky if you're one of the artists that the business wants to exploit. Because for the most part, they want nothing to do with you. I think it's really important to understand that while we have to do better in everything, we have to do so much better by creators of color and by audiences of color. And that brings me to an important component I haven't touched on a lot, which is audience. We talk a lot about diversity of arts and diversity of artists, and it's incredibly important that artists of color are promoted, that they're given stages, that they are able to make money and a living off of their art. But it is also incredibly important that we recognize a diversity of audience, that we recognize that these artists didn't come out of an ether. So often I will be asked, I've been invited by arts organizations, by theater houses, by all sorts of places to come and sit in their meetings to diversify the art, right? How can they attract more artists of color? And they never really consider audiences of color. They want to bring their white audiences something new. But they certainly don't think it's part of their branding to have a bunch of Black people walk through those doors next to their season ticket holders to view the art that their community nurtured into being. People don't think that our communities appraise art, value art. They certainly don't think we pay for art. But how do you think we survived when the traditional art community wasn't paying for our art? Who do you think fed us, gave us places to stay? Whose couches did we crash on when we were making up our own tours to get around and perform? Our community pays for art. They pay higher per capita for art than many of these traditional communities that arts organizations go after think they do. And I have seen time and time again, people want to pull art out of that community and never bring it to that community. I remember, even as a writer, being booked to speak at a wealthier college to a majority white audience, 10 minutes away from Ferguson. And no one thought that maybe I would want to speak in Ferguson. That maybe, a community that has been a source of inspiration to Black activists, a source of pain, a source of history, would be a place that I would actually want to speak, or a place that would want to hear me speak. And luckily, my agent, who I love to death, was like, hey, let's find some spots for you while you're here. But I know so many other artists, and there's so many other musicians who are constantly treated the same way. They're known for having this unique talent. They're known for bringing this diversity to the arts. And then they are immediately just served up to the same audience. Until, of course, they can learn to manufacture a watered-down version themselves. But there is a community, a diverse community for arts. There is a diverse market for arts. And if they are not showing up in your venues, don't come to me saying, why isn't this community interested in the arts? You should ask, why isn't this community interested in me? Communities of color have been the foundation of the American art scene since the beginning of this country. There would be no art without us. We create it, we nurture it. We are what are keeping you from just having to watch another meet-cute movie about a 30-something white dude who's mad at his dad. There's only so many of those you can see. We all love Joseph Gordon-Levitt, but come on. But you have to give back to that community. You have to see that community as valuable. You have to make your venues appealing to that community. You have to give back to the community that is nurturing the art that you depend on. I try to do this in my writing. I try to make things more sustainable than just for me. And this means that I not only am constantly arguing for the fact that there is an audience for my writing as I write, for my speaking as I speak, but that the audience is actually broader than many people think. I'm often asked to write about Black issues. If Beyonce does something, my inbox is full. But believe it or not, I'm Black all the time. I'm Black when I'm grocery shopping. I'm Black when I'm helping my kids with their homework. I'm Black when I'm watching the news. I have a lot of things I could be saying about the world. And there is an audience, my audience. It's not just a Black audience. There are plenty of people who have figured out that even though they're not Black and haven't been Black, they can still find value in my work. They can still relate. They can still follow along. And if anything, it's newer. In this world of oversaturation, it is something they have not seen before. It is a voice they have not heard before. It is a perspective they hadn't realized before. In this sense, I've had to challenge conventions in writing. I've had to fight back. I've had to tell so many editors, I wrote this because I am a Black woman, and if you didn't want me to write like a Black woman, you shouldn't have asked a Black woman to write this piece. And you're going to have to put that sentence back. And I know that your definition of grammar, it doesn't work for you, but I don't care. You're going to have to figure it out. I have constantly talked about our need to expect audiences to stretch. I am constantly applauding writers who will put Spanish words in the middle of their article and not translate it for you because you can Google. You're already on the internet reading the piece. I know that there's an audience for my work, not only because there is an audience for my work, but because I am part of that audience. I am constantly searching. I am constantly frustrated by how little diversity there is of voices, how many of these pieces of art that are supposed to reflect different communities never actually come from these communities, how quickly it can be divorced from its source, or how often it's turned into just a piece of consumerism for someone else. I know it can be done. I am proof it can be done. So what can you get from this really rambling, I would call it a story. You know what, I'm just going to call it a story. I'm a writer. It's a story. A couple of things. One is authenticity and originality can be marketed, but they cannot be manufactured. This is something you need to seek out and you need to nurture. You cannot build it back up once it's been destroyed. You cannot make it in a lab. Search for it. It is something your audience can't be fooled with either. Many people can't tell what the truth is when they're in a room when nothing's the truth. But the moment something rings true, especially in art, everything else is dead to them. And I've seen this happen. I've seen this happen with music. I've seen all these facsimiles of, different music from different regions, and people will be like, oh, this is great. I love my smooth jazz version of this African music. And you're like, what are you talking about? And then you'll get an actual artist from West Africa come in, and they'll be like, oh, I'm so embarrassed. I'm so embarrassed I ever thought that was great. Authenticity shines. And a lot of people think that in this environment they can get away with less authenticity, but the truth is you have so much more to gain from actual authenticity in a world where everyone is trying to peddle you something washed down and fake. The instincts that have helped diverse creators survive is the instinct you need to trust if you want to market them, if you want to bring audiences to them. The fact that you even know that these artists exist, if they come across your radar, means that they have survival and marketing and hustle that you would dream of. This is a world that actively devalues what we create. And if you ever get to the point where you are looking at them and watching what they do, know that the reason why they are there is because they have something that you need to pay attention to, not just creatively, but for how they run their business. Know that diverse audiences for the arts exist. Not only are they already telling you what they want by showing you where they're going, they are already creating what they want. And if you partner with diverse audiences, instead of trying to co-opt diverse audiences, you will find success. How art is marketed matters. Not only how it is marketed to audiences, but how decision makers see that marketing. How you decide to reach out to your audience for art sends a message to stakeholders as to not only what art is valued, but what audiences are valued. We like to pretend like when we market our work that we are just responding to market forces. We are creating market forces. We are deciding what part of humanity we want to appeal to. We are deciding, we are building an image of a consumer and deciding that that's the person that we're creating for. That is a message that resonates throughout the industry. And this means that you get to decide that you have a broader audience. You get to decide that there is value in diverse art. We can decide that diverse art is valuable not only financially but intellectually, that it is profitable not only financially but morally, and that it is sustainable not only financially but ethically. And I know that's 3 different ways to say the exact same thing, but I think it sounds nice. And I hope that you'll join me, because I don't want every Black woman who wants to build a name for herself having to spend as much time on Twitter and Facebook as I do. It's not healthy. I don't want everyone to have to work outside of the system, to have to put in years and years, and then also have this combination of luck and talent to build a name for themselves, and still then have to battle every single day to reaffirm what their art is and is not. There are artists right now who are leaving their art behind because they do not believe that there is a venue for them. They do not believe there is a gig for them. They don't believe that they can pay their bills, they can feed their families, that they can build a future. And that is art that we need now more than ever. And so I hope that you will join with me in rethinking what art can be, in rethinking what audiences can be, in rethinking your partnership with artists, and asking them how they got to where they are, and figuring out what you can learn from that in order to ensure that we have diverse, thriving arts in the years to come. Thank you. I'm not just standing up here to be weird. I've got like 5 minutes Q&A. I was supposed to have more, but I talked too long. Shock. So if there are any questions, I will try to answer them quickly. There's microphones, one there, one there. So if you have a question, go ahead and stand up and ask it.
Hi.
Hi.
Is this on? Yes.
Yes.
I am currently working full-time in arts marketing, which is why I'm here. I am also a freelance writer on the side, which I would eventually like to leverage into a career. How did you know it was time to make the leap?
You know, it was a, I sort of didn't feel like I had a choice at some part. So part of it was I was getting more requests to write. And then I had a full-time job. And it was, okay, I started having to turn down work writing in order to not get fired from my job. But also I would say that as someone who writes about social and political issues, when you have a space where you're spending a lot of time being honest and true to yourself, and then you have to go and spend 10 hours a day not being, I was losing the capacity to make that switch. And so then I had this day where I got this email, I was looking at this email from my boss, and I thought, today's the day I'm gonna either quit or get fired. And I just did it. And I did not have a savings account. I had actually just bought a house 4 months earlier. It was not, I don't recommend that, by the way. But I knew that like something was gonna give. And so I was either gonna be escorted out or I was gonna walk out, and I chose to walk out. But I would say like when you get to the point where you're starting to cut back on the art because you don't have time because you've built up that sort of demand, see what you can do to put a little cushion behind you and take that leap. You're gonna lose a lot of money at first. I lost a ton of money at first. It's worth it.
Thank you very much.
Hello, thank you for your talk. I'm just curious, when you said in the beginning you were pretty much on white media, the first one the book came out, what happened so that media of people of color like Roland Martin, that you were able to, they got wind of your book and you were able to be on those shows and media outlets?
You know, what made it lucky for me was, one, I'm not very quiet, right? So as I started to get more frustrated, my frustration started showing up in BuzzFeed interviews and things like that, where I'd be like, let me tell y'all something. But also, I would say that, you know, artists of color stick together. And there were plenty, what happened a lot of times were interviewers and things like that started reaching out and going, they want to know what black women are creating. And they would reach around and say, hey, you know, I didn't get a call for this book, but would you like to come talk about this? And, you know, and that definitely helped. But I would say, you know, the tightness of the community that we need to even get our work done is what I turned to. And I started looking at community. I was told at first by marketing that, you know, when I said this was a problem, I was told, we just don't really know any black people. I was like, excuse me? How is that? I mean, like, even if you weren't representing a black person, that's a problem, right? But I would say definitely it was more, I'm so grateful to the actual media and arts community of color that proactively seeks out this work, because no one's reaching out to them and says, hey, we want to do what we can. And that's really where a lot of that ended up happening. But then also I found was a couple of people would read it, and what has made me really proud is a lot of people of color have just found the book useful in their own life. And so a lot of times it would be someone in media who was reading it and it was just like, not even I'm reading it because I want to interview it, but this is helping me in my office with my white coworkers. I want to share this. And so I started getting a lot more of that, where a lot of people were just reading it because they were kind of desperate to have better conversations in the office. And then when it worked, they wanted other people to know this was a resource that was available to them. Any other questions? I think I have time for one more, if there's. No? What? Okay, so, I mean, you guys, most of you aren't even from Seattle. This is so Seattle. To be like, no, we're fine. It's fine, don't worry. We'll wait until the book signing and then we'll corner you and ask you 100 questions. Right? Yeah, I see that. All right. Thank you all for your time.
Short. Ooh, they've opened the doors. Okay, we are running late. This is serious now, folks. Okay. So, good morning. Buenos dias. Welcome and bienvenidos to day 2 of our fantastic conference. So, I'm going to do this quick. Couple of housekeeping things. One more round of applause for Ijeoma. So fucking amazing. I just want to make sure that if you did purchase a book and want to join us in Center Stage near the bookstore, we'll be queuing up the line for the book signing. All you fan folks out there, I'm going to beg you for some logistical consideration in allowing us to get her quickly to the bookstore because we have a short amount of time to pull all this off. So if you do have questions, you can queue up and talk to her, but we got to get her to the bookstore, okay? We still have slots open on the offsite tours, so if you missed the rush this morning, we do invite you to go ahead and stop by. It's over. If you're looking at registration, it's going to be that way. Or, well, that way. Right? Okay. And then we will be having the artist market again today from 10:30 to 2:30. It'll be different artists today than yesterday, so make sure you visit those tables there. They'll be in the same spots. Let's see. We will have daily recap again today at 5:40. Thank you so much to the folks that showed up. I think it was a really good time. And so we'll be doing that again in Center Stage at the end of the day. Tonight we do have our It might be a little too much coffee at this point. We have our annual dine-arounds, which are a great opportunity to get to know your fellow attendees. It's a Dutch treat dinner that is hosted. I'd like to give a quick shout out to the individuals that volunteered with us tonight to host you and lead some conversation. We've got some great restaurants. Thank you, Jacqueline, for organizing all of that. You can sign up at the membership table until 4:30 today, and then you will meet your group in the lobby at 7 p.m., and your dine-around host will organize you guys whether to walk or take transportation. And I'm just looking to make sure that I didn't miss anything. Thank you all again for joining us. Thank you again to Ijeoma for kicking us off in such a thought-provoking way. Have a great day.